All right, welcome back to the Fantasy Forecast. We're going into week 7. There's some crazy matchups this week. We have the Chiefs and the Chargers. We have the Eagles and the Dolphins. There's some great games. Really looking forward to this week. First off, to start off the podcast, we will go over some of the highlights from last week, some of the picks that we made, and then I will go into some locks for this week. All right, so to start off, let's see here. All right, so big highlight from last week. I said Dak Prescott was going to have one of his biggest weeks. He ended up putting up 24.9 points against the Chargers in PPR leagues. Dak was the top quarterback of the week. It was an entertaining game, and he was passing it all over the place. Cowboys ended up getting a win. Shout out to my buddy Dominic, huge Cowboys fan. I know he was happy about that one. Couple more players. Let's see. We said Trevor Lawrence would have a big game against the Colts. He ended up putting up 15.7 points. I was hyping up Matt Stafford quite a bit against the Cardinals. It was kind of a strange game. He ended up putting up 13.2. Not incredible, but not awful either. We said to sit. There's a couple I said to sit that ended up not even playing. Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson. I said to sit Ryan Tannehill, who ended up only having 2 points against the Ravens. I said to sit Brock Purdy against the Browns. He put up 8.7 points. I know I got some weird reactions on that one, but this Browns defense is legit, guys. Like, I don't know if I'd be starting any quarterback against the Browns right now. They're kind of hot, especially coming off a 49ers win. Like, there's going to be some hype in Cleveland, so be careful about that. Let's see. We said Josh Downs for the Colts would have a big game. He ended up putting 13.1 points up, which is like pretty good for a flex position, especially for somebody that wasn't even like really on the radar going into the season. CeeDee Lamb said to start CeeDee Lamb. Ended up having 18.7 points. Nico Collins with 12 points. We said to sit Devontae Adams. Now, on TikTok, I got some bad reactions talking about sitting Devontae Adams. Had some comments on that one. Guys, the stats are the stats for a reason, right? Like, yes, the NFL, anything could happen. Nothing's 100%. But when I'm seeing these huge red flags, that's what I'm reporting on, right? So Devontae Adams, 4.9 points. Like, I hope y'all took my advice. I hope you did not start him. I know it's hard to start somebody like a player of that caliber, but the algorithm, DeAndre Hopkins, 3 points. We said to sit him. I said Raheem Mostert would have a big game against the Panthers. He was actually the top player all week with 34.2 points, which is great. At this point, if you have Mostert, you're starting him every week. So I'm probably not going to put him in the start column anymore. He's earned his spot as a permanent starter. But I just wanted to brag on that one a bit. We hyped him up last week. That was last week's lock of the week, and 34.2 is incredible for a running back. We said DeAndre Swift would have a big game against the Jets. He ended up having 17.8 points, even though the Jets did pull out a big win. We said to start Isaiah Pacheco. He had 15.8 points. And then we said to start Kenneth Walker Jr. with 17.9. We're going to talk about that here in a bit, but let's get into a few more. We said to sit Rachaad White. He had 6.8 points. We said to sit Dameon Pierce. He had 3.4 points. And we said to sit Joe Mixon, who ended up having 9.2 points against the Seahawks. So overall, it was a good week. It was a good week as far as our predictions, as far as the algorithm goes. All right, so to hop into our picks going into week 7. All right, so quarterbacks I'm liking. So really number one lock for me this week is going to be Jordan Love against the Broncos. I'll talk about that in a little more detail in a bit, but the stats are showing quarterbacks are tearing it up against the Broncos. This matchup, I really like the analytics on it. Tua against the Eagles, I like Jimmy Garoppolo against the Bears, as long as he plays. I know he's a little questionable right now. As long as he plays, I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I do like Brock Purdy this week against the Vikings, and I really like Justin Herbert against the Chiefs. And then who I'm saying to sit Gardner Minshew against the Browns. I was just talking about being careful with the Browns. It doesn't help that he's a second string quarterback. I do think Minshew has potential, just not this week. Kenny Pickett against the Rams. Seems like he's making this list almost every week, but stats, that's the biggest red flag every week. I do not like Trevor Lawrence against the Saints. If he plays, he's questionable, but all signs are pointing to him playing, so be careful on that one. I don't like Mac Jones against the Bills, and I don't like Russell Wilson against the Packers. There's been several weeks where I've had Russell Wilson on the start list, and he's actually pretty good. I know he gets a lot of hate, gets a lot of jokes made fun of him. Russell Wilson's pretty good, but this matchup against the Packers, I do not like. All right, so going into Jordan Love on this Packers game against the Broncos, right? So let me pull the stats real quick. All right, so looking at statistically, I don't love the Packers passing game, but it's more so this defense is allowing on average 268 passing points per week. With 100. There's like 100% chance of one touchdown. It's going to happen, one passing touchdown. But there's almost a 100% chance of two touchdowns. It's like close, it's like 97%, right? I think he's going to throw it all over the Broncos. I don't know if Russell Wilson's going to be able to keep it close because this Packers defense is actually pretty solid. But I'm expecting 225 to 250 passing yards out of Jordan Love with two passing touchdowns, right? That's huge. That's really my lock of the week. Tua, I'm liking Tua against the Eagles. The Eagles have pretty bad secondary. I think they have the best D line in the league, but I do not like their secondary, right? Tua ought to throw for 265 to 295 yards this week, which is quite a few. It's a lot. I'm interested to see what the gambling lines say or what they have him at whenever those come out. But as far as the algorithm goes, he should throw for 275, right around that range, over two passing touchdowns. Expect Tyreek, expect Jalen Waddle to be all over the place. Jimmy Garoppolo against the Bears. Bears really don't have a very good defense. I've had I've had Garoppolo on the start list. I've had him on the sit list multiple times this week or this year. But this Bears team is just allowing, it says 267 yards to be passed on them on average per game, with at least a touchdown per game, leaning more towards two touchdowns. I think Garoppolo has a big week. Brock Purdy against the Vikings. I don't know if Deebo Samuel is going to play or not, especially it being a Monday night game. It hasn't been said yet, but I still think he has a lot of weapons on this team. He has Brandon Ayuk, he has George Kittle, Jawan Jennings. He's got some different weapons out there. I'm expecting him to really be passing all around on this Vikings defense that is just really not very good. Justin Herbert against the Chiefs. I'm liking this one. Chiefs secondary is all right, but they are allowing a decent amount of passing touchdowns per week. Herbert, especially coming off that Cowboys loss, I don't know if they're going to beat the Chiefs in Kansas City, but I think they keep it close for sure. Keenan Allen's on fire right now too, so I didn't include him on the list of start and sit just because if you have Keenan Allen, you're starting him, but somebody's got to throw him that ball, right? Matchups I don't like. Gardner Minshew against the Browns, kind of talked about that. The Browns have a top defense right now. Kenny Pickett against the Rams. Rams secondary is pretty good, but the Steelers just look awful. I mean, they'll have their few games where they look decent, but even like when they win, they're barely winning. And it's more so other teams making mistakes against them. Trevor Lawrence against the Saints. Saints have a very good defense. I'm expecting, algorithm says Trevor Lawrence, it's likely he's going to throw a passing touchdown, but he's not going to pass for many yards, right? It's saying 180 to 215. Not incredible, but I mean, this Saints defense is legit. It's a Thursday night game. It almost feels like a trap game. And it's in New Orleans. I'm not comfortable with Trevor Lawrence right here. Mac Jones against the Bills, pretty self-explanatory. I mean, I debated on even putting this one on the list because at this point, I don't know if anybody's really starting Mac Jones unless you're in like a very deep league. But they're playing the Bills. I mean, when you look at like overall stats, the Bills are the number 5 defense in the league right now. And I mean, the Patriots haven't looked good. Really, their defense is keeping them in games when it's even close. But Mac Jones, not liking that. And then Russell Wilson against the Packers. Let me pull those stats real quick. All right, so the algorithm says Russ throws for under 200 yards with a passing touchdown, right? Packers on average are allowing 1 passing touchdown thrown on them per game, while the Broncos are averaging 2 passing touchdowns per game. So anywhere between that 1 to 2 mark, but it's just the yardage. I think Russ struggles. I think there's going to be a lot of incomplete passes. I think they may have to lean on the run game a little bit this game, which doesn't help you out in a quarterback position. This just doesn't really seem like a good week for Russ. Yeah, so I mean, if you like any of these, disagree with any of these, go ahead and comment, whether you're on TikTok, YouTube, wherever you're watching this. I want to hear feedback. I like hearing the feedback. We can argue. We can talk about it. You can change my mind, but I mean, the stats, it's hard to get me away from the stats, right? All right, wide receivers I like this week. I like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. I will go into that a little bit more. I know I already talked about Jordan Love this week, but I like both of these receivers. Like the Packers seem to spread out the ball quite a bit. I think both have a big week. Potentially both get a touchdown. I don't think one of them is going to have 2 touchdowns. If they do, great. But if you have either one of these players, I would say definitely throw them in the flex against the Broncos. I like Devontae Adams this week against the Bears. I like Brandon Ayuk against the Vikings. I like Keenan Allen against the Chiefs. I didn't realize I did put him on the list, actually. And then I've got Stephon Diggs against the Patriots. As far as who I'm sitting this week, I don't like Amari Cooper against the Colts. I don't like George Pickens against the Rams. I don't like Michael Pittman Jr. against the Browns. I don't like Calvin Ridley against the Saints, and I do not like Drake London against the Bucks. So I already talked about Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Devontae Adams. Like I was saying earlier, Garoppolo should have a big game. Devontae Adams has had 2 bad weeks in a row. I think he bounces back this week. This Bears defense is awful. I'm expecting a big one out of him. Brandon Ayuk against the Vikings. Debo's pretty banged up right now. He may play, he may not play. We saw him. There's a couple passes he should have caught this last game against the Browns. I don't think it happens again. I think he gets targeted. I think he catches them. I think he makes the most out of these passes. We've seen flashes of greatness out of Brandon Ayuk. And I think this Vikings defense is pretty weak. So I think this is a big week for him. And then George Kittle as well. And I usually don't go into tight ends a lot in the show, but if you have George Kittle, like let's throw him in that category too of must starts. Keenan Allen against the Chiefs. We talked about Justin Herbert. And then Stephon Diggs against the Patriots. I like this matchup. The Patriots, their defense, defense is pretty good, but the Bills are throwing for a lot of yards right now. Josh Allen's averaging 257 yards per game, passing yards. Patriots, on average, are allowing 203 passing yards. So, like I said, they're pretty good, but the Bills are just scoring a lot. I'm expecting Josh Allen to throw at least 2 passing touchdowns. Stephon Diggs has to get one of those. Like, who else? Gabriel Davis, he catches some balls. But for the most part, that is like Stephon Diggs owns the receiving game in Buffalo. Amari Cooper against the Colts. All right, so the Colts statistically actually have a pretty good defense. Okay, not pretty good. Like, they have a decent defense. It's not a top defense, but it's not a bottom defense. But the Browns haven't really the passing game's not very good. At least at this point in the season. So really, I haven't announced if Deshaun's playing or not. PJ Walker played all right last week. He beat the 49ers, which says a lot. There was some iffy stuff about that game. I'm not going to get into that, but right now, I don't see any Browns players being must starts, especially this week against the Colts. I think it's going to be a big defensive game all around, very low scoring. Take the under. And it's in Indianapolis. George Pickens against the Rams. Not really going to go into that one. Michael Pittman Jr. against the Browns. Same thing as Amari Cooper against the Colts. This is a defensive game. Browns have a top defense. Michael Pittman had a good game last week, but the Browns, they're gonna shut them down. I wouldn't expect a whole lot out of Minshew or any of the receivers. Calvin Ridley against the Saints. I talked about the Saints defense a little bit. Ridley plays good for the most part, but so this just seems like a Thursday night trap game, like one of those 13-7 games, something like that. I don't know. I wouldn't start anybody in this Saints-Jags matchup this week just because the Saints defense is so good, and I don't really trust the Saints offense a whole lot. Drake London against the Bucks. Let me look at that one a little bit, because this could affect Kyle Pitts as well. Let's see, Buccaneers. Here we go. All right. Buccaneers defense isn't incredible, but they're not allowing a lot of passing touchdowns, right? Averaging right above 1 per game. I think this Falcons offense is there's too much going on, too many players going in and out on this offense that you're banking on one guy getting this one touchdown. And Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, it just doesn't seem safe. If you absolutely have to play him in a flex, that's fine, but I wouldn't expect a whole lot. This Falcons offense just really can't get much going. But then, like I said, the Bucs defense isn't incredible either. So I don't know. I don't expect this to be a very high scoring game. All right, we'll dive into running backs. We got two absolute locks this week that I really, really like. This first one, he's been on my list several weeks now, and he has not really disappointed us at all yet, and that is Kenneth Walker Jr. Really liking him against the Cardinals. I'll dive into that in a second. I like DeAndre Swift this week against the Dolphins. He was on the list last week, did really well. I like Brian Robinson Jr. against the Giants. I'm liking Jerome Ford against the Colts. And this one can go one of two ways. I like Deontay Foreman against the Raiders, but only if Roschon Johnson is out this week. He was on concussion protocol last week, and it's still questionable. But now if Roschon does play, then I'm saying he's a must start this week and sit Deontay Foreman. So I don't know. This is going to be a game time decision. If you have one of these players, though, you need to be paying attention to that, right? Because if you do, then one of them is going to be a must start this week against the Raiders. So I'm saying to sit this week. A couple of these may be questionable. I'll dive into that in a bit, though. I have Alexander Mattison against the 49ers, Josh Jacobs against the Bears, Rashad White against the Falcons, Austin Eckler against the Chiefs, and Bijan Robinson against the Bucs. First off, we'll go into these starts. Kenneth Walker against the Cardinals. All right, so this is like the number one like algorithm green flag. Hey, do it. You have to. Let me pull these stats real quick. All right, so Cardinals are allowing 133 rushing yards on average per game, right? Like, not very good. That's some of the most out of any NFL teams at the moment. But what really caught my eye was they're on average they're allowing 1.2 touchdowns per game, right? Which means several games there's two rushing touchdowns, and then other games there's one, but typically there is a rushing touchdown scored against the Cardinals. So algorithm says there's going to be at least one rushing touchdown, but it's a higher percentage that there's going to be two, and says that he should rush for over 90 yards this week. Really like Kenneth Walker. Like when he hits, he hits. DeAndre Swift against the Dolphins. Dolphins defense isn't very good. Let's see. Okay, so pretty much there will be a rushing touchdown. That's what the algorithm says. Higher percentage of there being a rushing touchdown than not being a rushing touchdown. I'm expecting DeAndre Swift to break 100. That's what the algorithm says. I would say 90 to be safe, but I mean should have another big game, right? Yeah, and I'm really liking DeAndre Swift. He's impressed me so far. This Eagles team is pretty legit. Brian Robinson Jr. against the Giants. If you've watched the Giants game, you will probably not disagree with me on this pick. I mean, they're just not very fun to watch. They're allowing on average 148 rushing yards every game. Allowing a rushing touchdown every game. Washington's doing pretty well scoring rushing touchdowns. They're averaging at least 1 to 2 per game. I would expect him to have at least a rushing touchdown. Algorithm says 80 rushing yards. That's solid. That's a big week. Jerome Ford against the Colts. This Browns team is just better at running the ball than throwing the ball. Let's see. Colts averaging 1.5 touchdowns per game out of the 5 games they've had, the 6 games they've had. Browns, 80% chance every game of getting a touchdown, right? So 0.8 rushing touchdowns per game. So right now, algorithm says 90% chance of a rushing touchdown, but then you have a little bit of a chance of 2 rushing touchdowns. I like it. I like Jerome Ford. I like him and Kareem Hunt. They're splitting reps. Jerome Ford's got a little bit more than Kareem at the moment. I think he had like 6 more carries last week. But I mean, he's a must start this week against the Browns. I mean, against the Colts. My bad. And then Jerome. Oh no, I said Jerome Ford. Deontay Foreman against the Raiders, right? Raiders rush defense not very good. Not very good. Let me pull the stats on that one. All right, so they're allowing 122 overall rushing yards per game, right? I mean, they're allowing more rushing touchdowns, the Raiders are, versus what Chicago's actually getting, but it's like such a big difference. Like a 67% difference that it seems like this is going to be the game where the running game really pops off for Chicago. I know they're looking for some wins. This is in Chicago. Like, the people of Chicago want to win. I'm expecting whichever running back, Deontay Foreman or Roschon Johnson, whoever plays this, I mean, they're going to pop off. This is going to be a 70-yard game, 1 rushing touchdown, potentially 2 rushing touchdowns. I don't know. But like I said, you've got to see who is actually starting, right? If Roschon is still out on concussion protocol, like we saw Foreman do some good stuff in Carolina last year, I think this is another really big game for him. But if Roschon's back, I mean, he's the guy, right? And we've seen some flashes of greatness out of him. So, I don't know. Just pay close attention to that. If you can get Deontay Foreman off the waiver wire right now and you have Roschon Johnson, get him for like insurance purposes. But whoever's starting, you definitely have to start this week. All right, as far as who to sit, Alexander Mattison. I do not like Alexander Mattison against the 49ers. 49ers have a great rushing defense. I'm not really going to dive into that. Madison's been hit or miss, mostly miss. But I'm saying sit him this week. I mean, you have a 25% chance of a rushing touchdown against the 49ers. Like they're not allowing rushing touchdowns over there in San Francisco. And Minnesota's not getting rushing touchdowns. I mean, it's 2 double negatives. 2 negatives don't make a positive in the NFL, right? So not the week for him. Josh Jacobs against the Bears. This one's kind of surprising. I mean, Jacobs hasn't been great this year, but the Bears, like, defensive line is actually decent. Now, their defense as a whole isn't great, but, like, the guys up front are actually doing a pretty decent job. The Raiders are more of a passing team nowadays. This is one that's, like statistics show, analytics show that if the Raiders are going to win this game, they have to do it throwing the ball. And I don't think Jacobs shouldn't have a very big week. 40 rushing yards, 40 to 50 rushing yards, 58% chance of a rushing touchdown. Those aren't like the worst odds, but I mean it's like tossing a coin, right? It's like flipping a coin. Let's see, Rachaad White against the Falcons. Falcons defense is pretty good. Rachaad White is pretty bad. So I'm going to say about that one. Austin Eckler against the Chiefs. So let me talk about this one. It's going to be hard to sit Austin Eckler if you have him, but Chiefs have a top defense right now against the run. And let's see. There's one stat I really want to look at. Let me pull that real quick. So the Chiefs. All right. The Chiefs have only allowed 1 rushing touchdown all year. Think about that one, right? As a running back, that's really where you get your points. You have your big breaks, but really, it's like these red zone rushes into the end zone is where you get your points. The Chiefs have only allowed one rushing touchdown all year. It's gonna be hard to sit Austin Eckler, but really, like, all signs say this is not his game. Everybody has a down week. I know he's just coming off an injury. Chiefs are averaging one rushing touch, or not the Chiefs. The Chargers are averaging one rushing touchdown per week. It just doesn't add up. This is going to be a passing game for the Chargers. If you have somebody to put in for him, I suggest doing that. Don't take my advice if you don't want to, but next week when we come in and I'm bragging about Austin Eckler not having a big game, don't say I didn't warn you. And then Bijan Robinson against the Bucks. This is another one that's like, it's hard. It's hard to look at the stats and say, oh man, I can't start Bijan Robinson, but like, the Bucks are another team that aren't allowing many rushing touchdowns. Let's see. On average, this is another one I want to look at really quick. All right, so the Buccaneers, where are they at? I just saw it. Tampa Bay. Oh, here we go. Okay, so Tampa Bay rushing. All right, so they've allowed 2 rushing touchdowns against them over 5 games, right? So teams are unsuccessful in the red zone rushing the ball against the Bucks. This is something that, I mean, the NFL hires people to look at the analytics and to like make these game plans for them, right? They're tracking this. And with a team like Atlanta, it's nothing's really guaranteed. They're going to try out both. They're going to try rushing. They're going to try throwing the ball. I don't know what's going to work for them, but as far as statistics go, like their Bucks are not allowing rushing touchdowns. So sit Bijan Robinson if you trust me, if you trust the algorithm. If you don't, it's fine. But I just really do not like Bijan Robinson this week. All right, so that's my picks. We do have a call. I'm gonna play that. I'll discuss that a little bit, and then actually a really good question that we're gonna dive into some stats. We're gonna look at it. So we'll let that roll real quick.
Hey, Fantasy Forecast, it's AJ Eagle. I got a question. I was wondering if this is the week that we should finally bench Zach Moss. I know he's had significant amount of points ever since he came in week 2, but with Jonathan Taylor starting to get more reps and them playing a tough Eagles defense, is this finally the first week in the season where we can feel comfortable actually benching Zach Moss? Thank you.
All right, thank you, AJ Eagle, for that question. AJ Eagle couldn't be on the pod today, but he will be back on it next week. It's very excited to get him back in here. He has some really good picks every week. I should have texted him, asked for a few of his picks this week, but we'll get him back next week. All right, so the question is Zach Moss. This is a really tricky one, just because Zach Moss is playing so good right now. Having Jonathan Taylor in the mix complicates things, but it hasn't been complicating things as much as I think we all thought it would. I mean, my advice here initially before I pull up the stats is that I would keep riding Zach Moss until he gives you a reason not to, right? I know it's tricky right now, it being midway through a lot of fantasy football seasons. But at the same time, if somebody's hot, somebody's hot. That streak could end this week. But like I said, if he hasn't given us a reason to sit him yet, so I wouldn't sit him yet. Now, if he has an awful week this week and you see Jonathan Taylor has 20 carries while Zach Moss has 8, then it's time to bench him, right? But I would ride him out another week. As far as the analytics this week goes, so they are playing the Browns. I know I've been hyping up this Browns defense, but there's actually some room for potential here for the rushing game in Indianapolis. Let's see. On average, the Colts are rushing 117 yards per game, while the Browns are allowing 79 to be specific, rushing yards per game, right? What I'm liking here, though, is the touchdowns, right? So there is a 80% chance of a rushing touchdown this week for the Colts. 80% is good. When you look at who's going to get it, I don't know. I don't have the answer. I don't know if it's Jonathan Taylor. I don't know if it's Zach Moss, right? But one of the two are going to get it, especially not having Anthony Richardson in the mix. It's a gamble, right? But that's what fantasy football is. But I would just say keep riding Zach Moss. If you have Jonathan Taylor, start Jonathan Taylor, right? If you have both of them somehow, first off, you're a lucky son of a gun. But second off, don't start both of them. Just go with whichever one your heart says. But yeah, keep riding out Zach Moss. I think this Colts team sees the potential in him, and I think it's hard for them to sit somebody that is like literally a top 3 to 5 running back every week at this point. So yeah, I like Zach Moss. I like him this week. He wasn't on my start list, but they start him. If my start list was a little longer, he probably would have made it on it. So yeah, appreciate the call. But yeah, I mean that's all I got for this week, guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. Let's have some discussions. Go check out the TikTok. Go check out the Twitter. All the links are in the bio. Let's have a good week 7.